Hello and welcome to another episode of 7th Tier Podcast, a weekly Storybook Rule podcast focused on strategy and high-level play. My name is Jethro, and I am joined this week and every week by your friend and mine, the best Gloomhaven player I know. It's Syth. Syth,
Hello.
how's it going?
Yeah, it's good. It's true, I did play some Gloomhaven on stream this week, but I am still a Storybook Rule player, I promise.
No, it's fun. I've been looking forward to making a Gloomhaven podcast ever since we played through the main campaign. We just pivot. We hard pivot at this point. What do you like in the meta right now? I like Scoundrel a lot in this meta.
Awful. No. Ew.
Contrary to popular belief, we are in fact still a Storybook Rule podcast, and we're kicking this week off like we do every week with our stats from the last 7 days. I'll go first. I've been finishing off a project these last 7 days. I've been trying to play every hero in the game 5 times on this patch. I've now finished that project, which makes my stats page really weird. It's a lot of heroes that I've played exactly once in the last week, where most weeks tend to be like a few heroes that you play once as kind of an experiment, and then a bunch of heroes that you like, you know, your Celestial Tigers, your Trophy Hunters, that you've played 5+ times. My page this week is the broadest it's ever been, and my stats are some of the worst they've ever been. So I've played 45 total games, with 9 crowns, 31 top 4s, an average finish of 3.62. Cool. Still above average.
Yeah, my stats are the worst I've ever reported on this podcast. So I've got an average placement of 3.51, 17 top 4s, 6 crowns, and only 27 games played. I think one of the thing that I was really struggling with this week was trying to figure out the power level of lobbies. With the tournament coming up and having not done particularly well in the previous tournament, I was trying to do a better job of evaluating when it's appropriate to be strong in the early game. And I think I did not a very good job of that, because traditionally on ladder, you know, I'm one of the top ranked players, top 100, top 50 for most of the week. I usually assume the early game is going to be relatively soft and use that time to scale as hard as humanly possible. I'll buy XP pretty aggressively. I buy pigs like it's the best tier 3 unit. I spend my time in the early game getting incredibly strong.
I mean, if you're ahead, pigs is the best tier 3 unit.
Agreed. Yeah, I spend my early game getting strong, and then the mid game I have extra cash, extra resources. I'm ahead, and I can get to that late game quicker and more effective than everyone else. The thing I found difficult this week is that I played in several lobbies where that didn't work at all. Presumably because other people were also trying to practice for tournaments or whatever, but they were fighting much more aggressively for that early game, as you would expect in a tournament. And so by the time I hit 3.2, 4.0, I was down well below half life, and things like my pigs were not paying out at all, because I had been losing the fights.
And then you're just scrapping for survival rather than trying to snowball mid-game strength.
Yeah, and it's really, really difficult when you're behind with the snowball units to get out of them. Like, I can't replace my pig very easily because I've got to, it's really difficult when you've invested in units that are only good when you're winning to replace all of those who were your okay 3-drops anyway, right? If it's 4.0, I still probably have some 2-drops or some middling units that I need to replace. I can't afford to replace the pig, which is in theory one of my better units. So it can be really, really tricky when you make that investment and it doesn't pay off.
That's part of why Brave Princess is considered such a trap, is because it's quite sticky in your comp for longer than it should be. Its stat size, Brave's stat size, is completely reasonable on the turn that you get her. But the problem is, because you miss one sleigh, you keep her in your comp until 4.1, 4.2, at which point she's really embarrassing.
Yeah. For sure. And it is really, so many of these things are compounding. Whenever your Vampire fails to slay, it goes from, 3.0 Vampire is a fine unit. And when it slays, it's fine. And when it misses for 2 slays in a row, it's dead. And just quite a lot of the units in the game end up playing like that. And so if you do evaluate the strength of the lobby wrong, it can be really, really brutal. And then I had the opposite problem, where I was over-adjusting. At that point, I was going, okay, a bunch of these lobbies are really good strong. I'm going to play for extreme early game strength. I'm going to play like it's a tournament. And what that led to was me coming third a lot, which is great in the tournament. In the tournament, if I came third a lot, I'd be really happy.
Yes.
But on ladder, I lose 2 rating for a third, so I can't sit there and be like, yeah, I came third in this game when I was strong for the whole mid-game. That feels really bad too.
I was going to say, on the majority of ladder, coming third is okay as well. When I'm grinding to Mythic, I don't mind a third. Yes, it's not as good as a first, but at least I didn't lose rating for this game. I'm still climbing.
Yeah, absolutely. Whereas, I'm disappointed when I get my thirds, and especially in games where I have felt strong throughout, because I've been playing for mid-game strength, but then I'm massively outscaled. The people I'm losing to are the people who spent their mid-game assembling Hatball, and I can't match the stats that Hatball is offering them. Or they're the people who've been having 2 Heartwood Elders scaling a tree the whole time, and now their Echoewoods are like thousands. Whoops, can't catch that.
Yeah, nobody has punished the Zelhuas and the Apocalypses of the world, and so they're just able to run all over the Waddles and the Pied Pipers in the late game.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm winning my fights by a lot and killing everyone, but if the lobby isn't cooperating and also killing the greedy players, then me being strong is irrelevant. I'm beating up on the players who were already losing, who were already weak, and the greedy players, they're going to take one big hit off me, but they can still stabilize because the rest of the lobby's been weak. It's tricky, and fundamentally, I think it's better to practice for the tournaments. The ladder doesn't mean anything, but it's really difficult when the quality of the competition in the lobbies can feel so varied.
You can look at a lobby sometimes. You can see just on the life point totals, and like my board, I'll be like, oh, I'm gonna come fourth this game because there's clearly 4 players who are still on 30-something health and 4 players who are on less than 10 health, and I am all in on mid-game strength.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm looking forward to this 4.
Unfortunately, that is how a lot of the matchmaking at Top Mythic works. Either because people are playing not the great heroes, or because they don't find that early game strength, or even something like they took a Humpty early and it cracked rather than tripled, and so they are just free falling. That happens all the time, and it massively affects the dynamic of a lobby in a way that's really, it's so difficult to just look at the information you're given, which is very little. It's just health total changes, and go, is this lobby strong? Is this lobby weak? Do a lot of ties mean the lobby was strong? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. And so I've that's what I've been struggling with this week, is trying to figure out how to kind of get tournament practice reps in a ladder environment. Has been tricky.
So that's a tough game indeed. This segues us quite well onto, obviously, the tournament coming up. It's the January qualifier this weekend. We're recording this on the Monday before. We're half expecting a patch to drop sometime in the week, but we don't think this patch is going to be a huge change to the meta. We're not expecting a bunch of new heroes. It's more a set of little tweaks.
I think it's going to change the end game quite a lot in a way that's going to be quite interesting. But I agree that not too many of the heroes will massively change in power level.
And as we've hinted in the introduction, a lot of tournament lobbies can feel very different to ladder lobby. When everyone's playing to win, there's no room to hide, there's no breathing space between these games. So we thought what we'd do today is go through Syth's tier list and say, well, these are the ones that we think are going to be slightly better in a tournament situation than they are in a ladder situation, because your tier list is optimized for ladder, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely a ladder tier list. There's the issue with doing a tournament tier list is you get so few reps. It's 6 games a month. I can't I can make judgments. That's what we're going to do now, but I can't back that up with any kind of data. We don't get the metadata for big tournaments. We did get it for the November Championships, which was really, really good. It was fantastic to see the stats of basically every single game being played. That is where a lot of this insight is going to come from for me. But overall, my tier list is for ladder because that's the environment I'm playing 99% of my games in.
Yes. So really here, we're theory crafting. We're using what we know of previous tournaments to make a judgment call regarding these heroes and to help us make hero choices, I think, next Saturday. So we're kicking things off at the top of your tier list in S tier with a lone hero in S tier. This is Trophy Hunter.
Yeah, so I definitely think Trophy Hunter is the best ladder hero in the game. That my stats completely agree. I come first incredibly frequently with Trophy Hunter. My average placement is 1.73. I think they're insane. However, I do think they're a hero that is worse in the tournament environment. Their hero power doesn't really kick in until 4.0. I will say, people, unlike Zelhua, who also doesn't have a hero power that doesn't kick until 4.0, Zelhua's hero power on 4.0 is generating you 1 or 2 gold, and Trophy Hunter on 4.0 is doubling the strength of your board sometimes. An extra monster book proc, an extra friendly spirit stat buff, an extra Tweedledee summon can absolutely swing a fight way more than the 2 gold you save as Zelhua on that turn.
The difference it makes going from a Trophy Hunter board that didn't get here in 1 turn to a Trophy Hunter board that's got there is night and day. You can feel like you're dying in a lobby, and then suddenly your units have triple-digit stats, and you feel unbeatable.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be. You don't even have to get that. You don't have to find Grimtor plus Friendly Spirit. As I'm saying, Monster Book and Tweedledee complete. There are so many units that can turn you on instantly. I really like Trophy Hunter. Really, really good hero. However, they don't do anything in the early game, and if we're talking about on 3.2, you're down to 18. Trophy Hunter fits in this category. Mummy is the only unit that, technically Black Cat, but that's so nothing. And Lucky is a unit. Like, 3.0 Lucky, I'm excited about on Trophy Hunter. It does get to slay. It will get to slay less. It's another disadvantage of Trophy Hunter in the tournament meta. People are going to have replaced their tier 2 units in the front line that you were normally slaying. People are going to have better units with better synergies and stuff. And so slaying's a little harder. Your hero power doesn't come until 4.
The sort of boards you face in a tournament, I can't imagine a Grimsoul getting a slay the turn that you pick one up.
Yeah, exactly. And so it definitely brings Trophy Hunter a decent way down. Trophy Hunter definitely worse. I still think we'll see some Trophy Hunters winning lobbies in the tournament, for sure, because the first potential of Trophy Hunter is insane, and sometimes you get there in the early game. You find the Mummy on 3.0. Great, you're set. But yes, I do think significant downgrade from the best hero in the game.
Moving into A tier, we have Pied Piper.
Pied Piper, a really solid hero. Extra stats right from 2.0. You have +1/+1 on the first turn, +2/+2 on the second turn, and maybe even +4/+4 by turn 2.2. Like, you're getting a lot of extra stats. They are limiting your options. You're probably less likely to have the high rolly, like, Frog Prince plus Sure Shot starts, because you're picking up animals. You're not buying Lonely Princes as often. You're more likely to find early triples. You're more likely to have extra early stats. And heading into tier 3, a bunch of the tier 3 animals are, generally speaking, the good ones, especially with +1/+1. Stag, Pig, just probably the actual 2 best tier 3 units. And then Donkey with +1/+1 is a really decent unit, although much worse in tournaments. Yeah, really like Pied Piper. They've got excellent early game, excellent late game. Can't see a problem with Piper.
Part of what I was going to mention on Piper is because the unit is created wholesale in the shop, I struggled in the last tournament to triple stags or pigs at any point, because everyone's picking them up. People know
Yes.
these are powerful units. They're taking them away from you. Pied Piper doesn't care what the other players are taking away from you. Next up is Wonder Waddle.
Wonder Waddle, I think, also going to do pretty well in tournaments. You don't have any inherent stats, but you can get treasures without sacrificing stats. Normally when you pick up a triple, you are losing the third unit's stats. Pied Piper doesn't have that problem, and has some of the actual nuttiest high roll potential, which is one of the best ways to win a lobby. The mice triple almost every game. You'll get a tier 4 treasure at some point for 4 gold, which is nuts. You can have some crazy, crazy starts. Yeah, I think Wonder Waddle will be just as good, completely decent.
I would agree. Next up is Peter Pants.
Peter Pants, I think better, for sure. It's a hero that doesn't have a fantastic first place rate, but has an insane top 4 rate, which is exactly what you want in the tournament environment. Yeah, I think Peter Pants is a hero that, if you don't know how to play Peter Pants going into the tournament, I think one of the best things you could do to prepare is get it down. It's it's complicated, but it is a relatively flowcharty hero, sort of. Tons of micro decisions, but a lot of the overall game plan is the same every time, and a really good tournament hero. I would highly, highly recommend Peter Pants for the tournament. I would pick it. I might even pick it the highest, because I just think they're so consistent at doing what they do.
I would agree, and I'm lower on Pants than you, I think, because of that consistency of top 4s. And I also think reps as Pants on ladder are very replicatable in a tournament environment. I don't think you're playing a significantly different game. Next up is Merlin.
Merlin, another hero that gets a ton of stats during tier 2, which is what you really want from a tournament hero. You're about 50% to cast 2 spells by 2.1. It's 49% to have done that if you lock scroll and so on. And a total of +4/+2 on that turn of the game is crazy. You do have to make sure you pick your targets and stuff correctly, but good early game, good mid game, especially now monster books on tier 4, a good late game plan if you can get 9th book or whatever. Do be careful of trying to play mages without treasures. It doesn't go particularly, like, monster book is not enough spells for the most part to make spellweavers and stuff valid units. But yeah, Merlin, really solid hero right from the beginning of the game. I can't see any reason that would be worse.
A couple of quick notes on Merlin. The first is I think it's slightly lower than 49% because that assumes you never lock a shot that isn't a genie's wish. And you might spend turn 1 buying Sure Shot, lock Frog Prince.
Sure.
And then you've also accidentally locked a free roll in the shop. Or whatever. You're still going to get 1 spell trigger. You're still going to be really powerful.
Yeah, agreed.
Also, don't be locked in on mages. Take those stats and use them to snowball power into any of the powerful compositions.
Yeah, Tweedledee and Friendly Spirit, also very good Merlin units. Get those stats on units that are good with stats.
There's a lot of ways to double down on stats these days. Next up is Sharebear, King of the Econ.
Yeah, I think Sharebear, has a bunch of early turns. They're no stronger on 2.0, but they're meaningfully stronger on 2.1. And then really the turns we talked about before with Share Bear, 3.0, 3.1, often the deciding turns of how the mid game's going to go. Share Bear is meaningfully favoured. The downside is there, but still never really impactful. It ends up balancing out, giving gold to the strong people, balanced out, giving gold to the weak people to keep them alive. And yeah, I think Share Bear will be no better. I don't think they generate a ton, like they're about, but they're already really good. They don't need to be better. It's fine.
I think it's hard for something in S tier to get much better. I think Pants lucked out moving up there. The thing to note about Share Bear is that sometimes you're giving people gold at a time that it just doesn't help them at all.
Yeah,
like I've received gold from Share Bear on 2.2 and been like, well, this is nothing.
And if you kill people because you're strong, that gold is gone.
And if they kill you, you stop sharing with them.
Yes.
I love dreaming out of Share Bear in finals against people. It feels so rude. Next up is Horde Dragon.
Yeah, Horde Dragon definitely one that gets worse, and for fairly clear reasons, right? Horde Dragon is mostly buoyed up, but they're extremely strong late game. They have a great first percentage because once you hit tier 6, you're the only hero that can almost every game get a tier 7 treasure, and those are game ending. You don't have an easy avenue to get tier 7 treasures like in the early game. You're not Celestial Tiger where you're gonna get map and like get it on tier 4. It can happen.
Yeah, you can map mouse technically, but it doesn't happen.
Sure. Yeah, that's much harder than map literally any 3-drop on Celestial Tiger. Yeah, so Horde Dragon can get a tier 7 treasure, but not usually till the late game. You going from tier 2 treasures to tier 3 treasures is meaningful. Like, most of the time when you triple a tier 2 unit, especially during tier 2, you've actually lost strength because you've presented less stats, and most tier 2 treasures don't actually make up for that. A few do. Jumping Beans definitely stands out and Shepherd's Sling definitely stand out as tier 2 treasures that mean that you're actually up stats when you triple something, but usually you're down. But the tier 3 treasures can make a huge difference. Both Hat and Ball can very quickly get you somewhere very strong. The Slay treasures can be a ton of stats instantly. Like, there's a lot of ways to get very strong from tier 3 treasures. There are not much scaling, but like, you're not going to lose a fight for a while with an Ancient Sarcophagus, right? If you've got any evil units at all.
I think like with Trophy Hunter, we're going to see Horde Dragons doing fairly well when it comes to coverage. But that's just because of their high starting point. Like, you really need that Cinderella. You need some way to get treasures as soon as possible.
Yeah, I would say that the lack of consistency in the early game for like, because again, you can absolutely like an early mouse is game ending on Horde Dragon. I've had people with Monkey's Paw on 4.0. Yeah, okay, cool. Your mid game weakness is, oh well. But that's not consistent, and the 45 health really helps. 45 health on every hero that has increased starting health can really get away with some of this stuff. But I will say, in tournament rather than ladder, 45 health is much less of a boy because it's very easy to turn strength into strength, and it's not as easy to turn health into strength. Like, if you greed out XP or whatever, because you're like, I've got extra health, I can afford to lose a fight. Okay, cool. You still need to find strength really quite quickly, and you still can't take units like pigs because you're not strong enough. And so it is easier to turn strength into strength than it is to turn health into strength. Yeah, as a generic point. I think both Sphinx and Geppetto are in A tier. I haven't figured out. My stats with them are not good enough to warrant that, but I definitely trust the community, and I definitely see them winning a ton of my games. Sphinx in particular, I'm getting better at, and it must be A tier. The hero is so strong. Sphinx, I think, though, is a little bit worse in the tournament. You don't have those stats straight away, but seeing 2 spells does mean you are more... the strength you gain from finding a relevant econ spell in the first 2 turns is a massive power spike. If you get to find Forbidden Fruit or Shrink Ray, you are up a full unit of stats, which is way more than like a +1/+1 spell, or heaven forbid a roll, right? Which happens all the time as heroes who don't see 2 spells. It also means you're way more able to flip a Cinderella or have Wizard's Familiars be valid units to pick, when normally Wizard's Familiar on tier 2 is very, very sketchy.
Agreed.
You're just way more able to actually, like, it's much less direct than like Merlin, but it's not nothing. It's not the nothing it might look like until you get 3 spells on 3.0. And at that point, you can almost instantly become crazy strong. Like, it doesn't take much for Sphinx's hero power to get out of control. If you buy XP, you're actually not any stronger for a couple of turns, but on what is 3.2 to everyone else, you not only are buying tier 4 units, you're then casting another free spell, which can be one of the tier 4 combat spells potentially, and at that point, you're going to be strong for a while. And of course, the nutty high rolls. When you find Crystal Ball, you win the whole lobby instantly, or whatever, especially if everyone is scrapping for this mid-game. If you are at tier 6 and haven't been weak, you're just going to kill everyone.
Sphinx Ball is one of the most fun things you can do in the game.
Absolutely. Normally, if you accelerate to 6, sometimes someone else in the lobby has also gotten away with accelerating to 6, and you still have to scrap it out. It's much less likely that that's going to happen in these lobbies because it's so hard to take Make-A-Wish. So hard.
So expensive. You'll be so far behind on a turn you take Make-A-Wish. What about Geppetto?
Yeah, okay, Geppetto's interesting. Again, my stats indicate that Geppetto is one of the worst heroes ever. I don't like him at all, but again, I believe the community consensus that he is pretty solid. And I think he'll be fine for tournaments. He is dependent on finding specific units. If you don't find a Princess Peep, you're going to have a bad time. But when you do, you're so strong for ages, and if you know how to leverage strength into strength, you get those pigs, you buy those 4 glories, you buy those spinning golds, you can snowball. And then again, because I think coming first is less relevant, which I have found to be one of the difficult parts of Geppetto. Like, I will often get to the late game and be like, I've got all these animals, Bearstein isn't that winning a comp, what do I turn this into? Less of a concern in tournaments where the difference between first and second is as much as the difference between fourth and fifth, but a second is fine. And in terms of getting out of the 8th through 5th bracket, I think Geppetto will do you a great service. Often doesn't have a hero power till 3.0 unless you find the Black Cat, but on that turn, instant power spike if you find that peep, and that's enough to carry you for ages and ages.
Yeah. I'm so familiar with that thought process of getting to tier 6 and being like, I have all these animals. Oops.
Yeah. Cool. Now we're heading into B tier, starting with Zelhua, who I have at the top of my B tier, because, again, I have to come first in my lobbies. I like nutty late game heroes. And I think Zelhua is probably the 3rd best. I think, if I had to late game heroes, Trophy Hunter, Horde Dragon, Zelhua makes sense to me. Zelhua also a hero with 45 health, so you can often get to that late game. And your hero power does kick in at 4.0. It's not like Grandma where you don't have anything till tier 6. You've got something there. But yeah, I think generally speaking, Zelhua is going to be worse. You've got no hero power till 4.0, and even then, it's like 2-3 gold on that turn. That's not enough to keep up with the people who've been strong and have leveraged that strength into strength. I think Zelhua will be meaningfully worse.
I mean, on that turn, it's the same as having had a pig survive on 3.2, right?
Yeah.
If you're strong in the early game, you can have 1 or 2 pigs live on that turn, and that's the same as what Zelhua is getting from their hero power. Next on the list is Fallen Angel.
Fallen Angel, got to be one of the classic early game power spike heroes. Back in the day, back when we had a ton of early game heroes running around, people like Galahad or old Loki, who were just consistently incredibly strong on 3.0, Fallen Angel was in that category, and it was part of the reason you had to play late game heroes weren't even viable because so many of the good heroes were the good early game. That's no longer true. Fallen Angel is the last remnant of that. A hero that has potentially on 3.0, my entire team has +2/+2. Imagine playing Krampus when that hero power exists. It's so strong, so consistently. Even if you don't turn on both, you're really likely to have at least half by 2.2, so you win your 2.2 fight. You're better than Jack's Giant if you can get 3 good units by 2.2, and that's very, very doable.
I will say you're a little dependent on the shops that you offered. I've definitely had early games where you offered 3 neutrals in the shop, and it's like, this is gonna suck.
Yeah, it can happen that you don't turn it on until 3.0, 3.1, but even then, +2/+2 is such a big leg up over the environment. You can take pigs incredibly consistently. They're like 5/8s. Who's beating a 5/8? You can take those really powerful units. You can buy XP relatively aggressively. You can spend tier 3 getting out of control. Summons become even, Peep is almost Geppetto levels of, Peep's a 13/13. What on earth? Yeah, you can get some really crazy stuff going as Fallen Angel. I think they're one of the ones that really benefits in the tournament environment, where if everyone's strong, you're still going to be stronger.
You can get those stats 2 times out of a Tweedledee or out of a Friendly Spirit as you spiral out into the mid-game. Don't play too many Tweedledees, you'll regret it.
Pig similarly.
Fallen Angel might be, for me, second only to Pants in terms of likelihood I take them in the tournament. I think they're really strong. Speaking of stats you can acquire in the early game, we have Charon.
So I actually think Charon is a little slow for tournament play. One of the things you'll probably not run into that can be a problem with Charon is you present a unit and it doesn't die. I have definitely been in that awkward situation where I present a 2/2 on turn 1, and for some reason my opponent picked a turn 1 Polywoggle, and so my unit didn't die and I didn't get any scaling. I think people are less likely to pick Kitty Cut versus Polywoggles because they're bad and they'll lose you fights, in my experience. So your units are likely to die and you're likely to get the stats every turn, but the stats are quite slow. like, especially compared to some of the really good heroes we're talking about, it's a lot less stats than something like than Fallen Angel and less than Merlin and stuff, and it doesn't continue to ramp up in the way that Merlin does. I've come down on Karen in general this last week or so. It is early game stats. You're certainly better than a hero who doesn't do anything till tier 4.
Yeah.
But, like, if those stats end up in the wrong place, it definitely restricts the units you can take, and it can be difficult to transition out of those units. If you end up, you take, like, a Billy Gruff on turn 1, he gets 2 versions of the stats. How long can you really keep a 6/5 around? It's not very long at all when everyone is as strong as they are. And it's nice that...
Who killed your Billy Gruff on turn 1? Like...
But, why did I pick Billy Gruff on turn 1? Look, you get the idea. Like, turn 2, right? Turn 2, I buy a Billy Gruff. Like, I ideally want my Sure Shot. I want my unit in slot 1 to die. And the other issue with Karen is that one of the stronger things you can do is a Polywoggle play. You can play a Polywoggle, expect it to die on the first turn, get some stats, probably die again, and then maybe get a Slay once it's a 5/3.
Yeah.
But I've chosen to lose 2 fights at that point. I can't pay 6 life for a 3-drop unit. Or even a 4-drop unit. 6 is a lot of, like, you're gambling really hard at that point, and I think Happy Little Tree is in a similar place. If I take Happy Little Tree, one of the best the units I'm most hoping to hit turn 1 is Charon.
Yeah.
But what it gives me is a turn 2, 3, 4, which is not exciting, like, and I want it to die, so often I choose intentionally kind of bad positioning to make sure my big-ish unit dies. You often sacrifice a bunch of early health to get mid-game strength, and that's a scary prospect when, if you can't turn that corner quick enough, because they have a dragon and the unit you weren't expecting to gets the stats, or whatever, it can go pretty south pretty quickly. So Karen, good, but not better, despite having early stats.
I think I agree with you with Karen. I think I come in stronger on Karen because I'm weaker on them generally on ladder. But I think You're right that they're probably around the same for tournament play. Same for me, weaker for you. Next up, we have Cursed King. Sorry, the Cursed King.
Yeah, Cursed King is going to play pretty similarly. Early econ is really good. Losing life sucks. Like, I would say on average I deal like 4.5 damage to myself on Cursed King over the course of a game, just because there will be turns where I either can't or don't want to cast spells. That's not across like 13 turns, there's like 1 or 2 that I don't manage to cast a spell, but they do come up. And or actually, potentially even worse as Cursed King, I cast a spell I settle from mediocre spell early in the turn, and then I don't get to cast the powerful, the worm root that I would have really liked.
I think I'm much further on that side of the equation. Like, I take like 1.5 damage or less on average as Cursed King. It tends to be because I forgot I have a hero power.
Sure. But that's still a problem. Like, it's
Yes.
You have still lost strength when you settled for a +1/+1 for 1 gold, rather than finding a worm root, finding a devout at the end, finding these much higher impact spells. So I think Cursed King, the early econ is still great. I still am a fan of Cursed King, but about the same, not better, despite having early econ.
Next up we have Celestial Tiger. I'm leaning worse on this one.
Yeah, Celestial Tiger is a classic high roll hero, where if people give you the wiggle room to... You often sacrifice especially during tier 3, you are really aggressively trying to assemble triples, which often means not improving your board directly, and that means you are giving up strength that you're hoping you can leverage into a huge power spike when you find double Ancient Sarcophagus or whatever.
Also, sometimes you're buying a pair of Minotaurs. Nobody wants to buy a pair of Minotaurs.
I still wouldn't do that.
Really? You're Celestial Tiger. Buy your pairs of Minotaurs.
Sure.
You'll be fine.
Yeah, fundamentally, though, you do have to... It is a swingy hero. Any treasure-reliant hero can be pretty swingy. If you work really hard to find your tier 3 treasure and you're offered, a bunch of treasures that don't synergize with what you've got, Deepstone Mine, Cloak of the Assassin, Eye of Ares. Oh god, no. You can end up in a really, really rough spot.
Have you not done Eye of Ares Tiger?
Look, I know.
You need to go for the Eye of the Tiger.
Similarly with tier 2 treasures, actually tier 2 treasures even more so. There are 22 tier 2 treasures. A couple of them are actually nutty when doubled. Lock Chest, Secret Stash. But some of them are Ring of Meteors, and double Ring of Meteors needs a lot of work before... It can be great, but it's not inherently good.
Interestingly, double Ring of Meteors, because you're able to set up your board for it, dealing 2 damage to all of the opponent characters can be really good.
Sure. That's true. Things like Hermes boots, it's an example of a hero, a treasure that literally does nothing when doubled. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
Bounty book.
Does it not beat opponent's Hermes boots if it's doubled?
It does, but it's the early game. Why do you care? So yeah, Tiger, I think a high roll hero. One of the best ways to come first, like day 2 of the tournament, when coming, you need to have consistent. Like almost all of this discussion about day 1 of the tournament, because I think that's the primary goal for people trying to improve. Once you get to day 2, you can figure it out. If you have to come first for whatever, maybe you just had a bad day 1. Maybe you've had a series of mediocre finishes, and the only way you can get out of it is to come first. Tiger, one of the heroes that can come first, but on the average, Tiger down.
Yes, I would agree with that. Next up is Potion Master. I've decided, as part of my experiment, Potion Master is my Geppetto. It might be a good hero. I cannot win a game as Potion Master.
Oh dear. I think the secret with Potion Master is that the buffs are surprisingly bad. Like, targeting spells is basically irrelevant, and what you're mostly getting is the C2 spells Sphinx-esque play. Like, I would still rather have an Econ spell on turn 2 than a buff spell. Like, and he does give you twice as many looks at those kinds of spells. You're more likely to find XP, which, if you're strong, is good. And you're more likely to find things like Worm Roots that are a target spell that is extremely cost efficient.
It's the best 2-drop.
Yeah, I think Potion Master does have a hero power, does have that, can be strong during tier 2 if they find the right econ, which they're more likely to do. I think in general they're not so dominant in the early game that, like, they're not moving up, but they do something early, they can stay where they are.
I want to say they're weaker because I think if everyone else is going for early game power, being the 6th best at the early game in the lobby can be a tragedy.
Yeah, I agree that can be true. Yeah, especially if everyone is strong, you can't buy those. You're seeing twice as more Make a Wishes, but you still can't buy them. Twice as many Four Glories, you still can't buy them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little rough.
Speaking of buying XP, we have Apocalypse.
So this is the classic example. This is basically why this list exists. Apocalypse is a hero that is massively worse in tournament play than on ladder. Previously, when he was still at 50 health, he was one of the most picked heroes in the full championship, but also one of the worst performing. If everyone is playing for early game strength, you will be dead. You cannot. 5 health, especially now it's not 10, is not enough in a lobby where everyone is dealing you as much damage as they can for you to leverage that for the plus 3 XP or whatever that you need on Apocalypse for him to be a good hero. You just don't have that time. You can't afford to spend tier 5 rolling and locking for XP spells. Like, if you play Apocalypse, you will die. I expect Apocalypse to be... I would pick him like he's a D tier hero.
Yeah, you can't... I would pick him like he's an F tier hero. You can't get to turn 6.1 consistently in tournament lobbies. Similarly, we have Grandmother.
Yeah, I think Grandmother is doing the exact same. She does have that extra 5 life buffer, and she does get that power spike a little more instantly. Like, I genuinely think on the turn they hit 6.0, Grandma is usually stronger than Apocalypse. Apocalypse needs 1 turn of breathing room to turn their mishmash of 6 drops into something resembling a comp, in my experience. Even when you go into that turn with like 18 gold as Apocalypse because you locked properly, you still need to find pairs or synergies.
Areas of synergy, yeah.
Whereas Grandmother can go into tier 6 knowing that she's got units like Tierlists and Friendly Spirits that instantly get twice as strong with +5/+5 and doesn't need that extra turn, and she's got 5 more life. So I would say Grandmother is better than Apocalypse, but still bad.
And still worse than she is on ladder. Next up, we're moving now into C tier, going a little bit faster because these heroes, we're less likely to take them generally anyway.
Yep.
Starting off with Gwen.
Yeah, Gwen. I often like knighting 4 drops on Gwen, which is not a valid tournament strategy at all. You'll just be dead. So realistically, you're forced to knight Happy Little Tree or Wizard's Familiar, and if you don't see one of those on the like actual 2.0, you're going to be in for a really bad time. I think I'm more likely to settle for mediocre knights as Gwen. Knighting something like a Sleeping Princess to just get a 16/16 on 3.0 doesn't sound good, but will get you alive. If you failed to find the Wizard's Familiar or the Happy Little Tree, you might have to settle for plays like that, and it's a bad time.
I've got to mention a line we saw on the coverage of the last tournament, which I do like, but is hard to come together, is on tier 3, mix Wizard into Knighthood.
Yes, absolutely.
You get a random 4, but it's knighted.
Yeah, absolutely. Mixed Wizard Knighthood is generally a strategy I do look out for as Gwen, but again, so far from consistent in assembling it. It's fine if your default plan is to knight a 4-drop, then you're just looking for mixed Wizzles and you can potentially do that. But if your default plan is I need to knight something early, you can't afford to spend 3.9 rolling for mixed Wizzle or whatever, that's nothing. You're going to have I would say Gwen moves down. Like, if you get the Wizard's Familiar or the tree, you can be strong right from the get-go. It doesn't happen. I don't know, I haven't done the exact odds, but it's not great, so.
Next up is Miri, King Lion.
I don't know how to feel about Miri. I really liked him back in the day when his hero power was twice as better with +2/+2.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you get one trigger, you're active and you're online and you're basically Fallen Angel, you're having a good time. The issue is that often that's not, if you don't see the Cinderella in particular, you're doing a lot of rolling early because you're looking for pairs rather than looking for strength. You're looking for very specific units and you're very inflexible. If the shop on 3.0 offers you Evil Witch Mummy, you probably have to take it, but it means you're not going to have a hero power for a long time, and that sucks. Yeah, it's rough. I would say Miri is inflexible enough that they move down. You don't have enough strength early unless you get there, and even when you do, you're inflexible, and then you don't have a great first rate, you have a great second rate. I would say Miri is probably a little worse because the inflexibility really hurts.
I'm torn between my desire to say what I want to say and my desire not to spend 10 minutes chatting about Miri. Miri is probably my highest performing hero this patch. Not literally, but I have 10 games played with an average finish of 2.83 crowns. And I was trying to work out why that is. Like, they got weaker with that nerf, but this patch is an extra patch on from there. And I think the answer is that they buffed Lancelot, and taking Lancelot as Miri is now really free and really good.
Sure.
Previously, it could be a little bit awkward. You had to find the spells. Now it's often one or two slays away from just triggering on its own.
Sure.
Or one slay and a spell. Or one slay and tripling any other royal that you've got in your team. If that is the reason that Miri's better, Miri is worse in tournament. Because they're worse early and better late. You're also in tournaments way less likely to get those Brave Princess slays, as we talked about before, because people's units you're way less likely to get those Nutcracker triggers. People's units are bigger and they're just killing your stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I think that really hurts.
Next up we have Mad Catter, Embrace the randomness.
I actually think Mad Catter will be totally fine in the setting. The total amount of stats they gain is not fantastic. You have +2/+2 on 2.1, but by the time you get a second buff, it's often not till 3.0 where you're buying less units, or like the total amount of stats that Catter offers is not amazing, and buying random units has inherent problems.
Yeah.
When you find free rolls early, you're going to crush it. Like, the first time of the game you're offered a free roll, you're going to win all your fights for a while. But the odds of that are not great, and the default, and sometimes you roll stats onto an egg and you cry a lot, because taking an egg in a tournament setting is truly terrifying. Yeah, Mad Catter is about the same, I think. Like, they do have early stats, they're not dominant early stats. Fine.
I think the same. Definitely the most terrifying on this list. Next up, you've got Sad Drak.
As we talked about, slaying is harder when everyone is presenting good boards. I don't know how it affects the actual 2.0 turn in terms of, how likely am I to get that first slay, which is so important on Sad Drak. People are probably a little less likely to buy eggs, I assume, which is your main fail case. But regardless, I think Sad Drak is still middling. Like, attacking first doesn't make that much difference during the mid game. You don't have, all your stats are in power, which if you don't get it on the right targets is irrelevant, and the real difficulty you'll struggle with Sad Drak is swapping your first slot position, which is something you have to do at some point, right? Like, you have the sure shot or whatever, you've got it to an 8-1, cool. Giving it more power isn't really helping. What I'd like to do is put power on something else, but none of my other units are big enough to slay when everyone else is strong. I'd love to put Mummy in that slot. I mean, this 8-1 is going to stick around for ages. I'd love to get this Mummy slaying. How the hell am I doing that? How on earth is a 2-1 slaying?
Yeah. First of the game is always going to be this attacks and dies.
And if you didn't find that sure shot and you're stuck with like a dragon that you made into a 7-2, that definitely can't slay in slot 1. That's just trash. And yeah, I think Sad Drak, that pivot that you have to do as Sad Drak is so difficult. It means you have to find a Sporko or a relevant support to help you get that, and that's more interlocking pieces that just don't come together.
I think Sad Drak is worse. Next up we have Skip, the Time Skipper.
Much worse. Skip is a classic, just needs a turn of breathing room, please. And that's exactly what you don't get. Like, Skip just needs that one turn where they can have their pig live. Because, you buy pigs very often as Skip. They're the highest stats you can get. I definitely would buy a pig on 2.1.
Sure.
And it'll still often win the fight on 2.1, but when it doesn't, you're super dead, and you're when it doesn't work out, it can snowball out of control in the negative way, and you are so much less likely to you're less likely to have that, 3.1 oh, this person just hasn't found their strength yet. That's cool. That means I not only win this fight, but also gain a ton of economy with my greedy and my pig. You just don't get that breathing room and you just die. Yeah, I would say skip is extremely high risk in a tournament environment. I would heavily lean away from them.
I would also lean away from skip. Next up, we have Mwert.
5 health is not as strong on ladder in tournaments as it is on ladder. You know, the hero power doesn't do very much at all for a very long time.
If you don't find the mummy, you're dead.
Yeah. Or the lucky. Just never think about the lucky.
You're also dead.
That's fair. That is fair.
I'm so sorry about your 3-2.
Yeah.
Say hello to my frog princes.
Yeah. Muerte is rough and significantly worse. Morgana, another hero that's in the same bracket. You're just gonna die. Like, not only your hero power kicks in earlier, but is worse. Like, you're much more likely to get a tier 4 treasure, which might be enough to stabilize you. Like, I have had games as Morgana where I've managed to somehow be really strong, and my hero power didn't trigger till tier 6, but then I went from 30 to dead in 2 fights, and that one fight of Ivory Owl wasn't enough. But overall, I would say, yeah, Morgana, not better. You're just going to die early, and that one tier 4 treasure isn't enough to get your feet under you. I expect that quite bad.
I would agree with that. Next up is Mask.
Mask is worse for several reasons. One, no hero power during tier 3, always a problem. It's definitely an issue of Mask, is that you don't do anything, and the 3.0 is often a little late. And the problem is, people will be picking the good heroes. On 3.0, you're going to be offered 4 heroes. It's much more like that those 4 heroes are the weak heroes. They're going to be the FD heroes that people aren't picking. People aren't taking Fates out of your hero pool, which you would like, and you are more likely to have something like Skip, like we're saying, leave heavily away from Skip, and Skip's one of the best hits as Mask, but you would still rather, most of the time, be Pied Piper and just be a strong hero, or, Merlin. Yeah, you missed out on the early game, but now you're strong, fine. Yeah, I think Mask has fallen from graces in general and won't be better in the tournament environment, will be worse.
I would lean slightly better, just because I believe there's enough quality heroes in the game, just because Mask's so bad most of the time.
Sure.
Having that slightly better chance to hit Skip or Gwen, I think Skip and Gwen both offer the same thing of letting you use your second Mask really effectively, while gaining an advantage from the first one. But still a bad hero. Next up we have Loki.
Loki's a classic, better in tournament play. You do actually get a ton of early stats. Like, you're a little less likely than you used to be to get the early economy, but you can control that if you know what you're doing, by ideally buying neutral units and no monsters. But then he has a ton of early economy and sometimes free XP and stuff, which can be really, really strong. And you're not spending any of your gold on spells. You're spending it entirely on making your board stronger. The classic Loki play used to be mid-game dwarves as because sometimes you cast Hi-Ho and it was a comp that wasn't very spell reliant. Like, you're never going spell weavers or whatever. Yeah. And so dwarves was just a place you often ended up. And certainly my experience in the old tournaments, you fight Loki dwarves in the middle game and you're taking 18 and you're just dead. Oh god. One of Loki's biggest weaknesses is that he sucks at tier 6, because rather than being able to buy very powerful spells like Evil Twin and Knighthood, you're casting Forbidden Fruits and are very upset. Sometimes you dream out, but now the spell pool is huge, so that's so unlikely.
You have no control over when you get to.
Yeah, for sure. So I expect Loki is better in tournament play, again, because once you're tier 6, you've done great most of the time. Yes. If I hit tier 6 on any hero, I am happy with how that game has gone, and I can worry about it later. I think Loki does a great job of being strong early a lot of the time. I'm very happy to have Loki.
Speaking of things we're not happy to have, we have Beauty.
A classic hero that, although there are 2 specific treasures that can give her unreal early game power spikes in Ancient Sarcophagus and Dark Contract, but if you don't find those treasures, mostly what your hero power is doing is letting you play pumpkins with your good boy, which is a really fun and cool late game thing. We don't have how have you got that? Your hero power didn't do anything. Like, you can do Peep Evil Queen, another 2 specific unit combo that can carry you for a while. Fundamentally, there's too many fail cases. If you don't, there are a few avenues for strength, but if none of them come together, you just don't have any text at all. Putting a Minotaur next to a unicorn is not a hero power. It doesn't do enough, and by the time it can consistently do enough, it's way too late.
I should have mentioned we moved into Sith D tier at this point. We've got Mrs. Claus. I think this is a classic, is slightly better.
Yeah, for sure. It's a bunch of stats early. The good units are usually the ones you want to be buying on tier 2. She's actually one of the strongest tier 2 heroes. Both Unicorn and Sure Shot are massively improved by being +1/+1. Even Lonely Prince being a 2/2 is like a 2/2 is more than twice as good as a 1/1 during
Being
tier 2.
able to spec on a Lonely Prince without a princess in the shop
It's
is
so nice.
meaningful. If you're
Yeah,
someone
yeah,
else,
for
maybe you
sure.
have to take a crafty there. Or something.
And then a bunch of most of the tier 3 units that I want to buy are good as well. Like Stag, even Ogre Princess, way more likely to slay with +1/+1. Brave Princess, like I'm very Mrs. Claus.
Donkey more likely to survive with 1 extra toughness.
Absolutely. And by the time you get to the stage where the issue with Mrs. Claus is that very quickly, once you hit tier 4, our power orb is no longer an exciting hero power, and it's worse than a power orb, right? Because it has restricted your options.
Yes.
It's closer to a Shepherd Sling, and a Shepherd Sling as a hero power is great for the early game and then falls off. I think Mrs. Claus is in a similar place. In a tournament environment, I'm fine with that. Get me to tier 4 at 35 health, and I can figure it out from there.
Yeah, you gotta playing the game is more important than the hero power. Next up, we've got Headless Horseman.
Headless Horseman is interesting. He's probably a little better, in part because people are more likely to be playing these early game heroes that might have given their units buffs. Merlin in particular and Wonder Waddle are both units that Headless Horseman would love to face, because stealing an early golden unit from Wonder Waddle or stealing a unit with a couple of Merlin buffs are both crazy power spikes. Even like a Pied Piper animal with +1/+1 is really good. You do have to make sure that you're actually able to kill a unit. That is something that can be difficult on 2.0 in particular. But I would just fire off my kidnaps very, very early. Some people save one for the late game. I would never do that in a tournament environment. I don't tend to do it in general.
If you want to kidnap in the late game, just buy one from the shop. They're not expensive.
Cast your kidnaps. They enable you to take Wizards, Familiars, and Cinderellas more freely, which is nice as well. It is an early game hero power, deceptively, and a fine one. It definitely has a fail case. I'm not saying he's a good hero, because like some people are going to be so strong that you're not going to get to kill anything, and when that happens, you're dead instantly. Like, or it's rough.
Yeah, if you lose one of those kidnaps for no value, like it feels like you should get one back.
Sure. Regardless, Headless Horseman better in tournament environment, but not good, I would expect.
We're finally down into F tier.
I'm not gonna individually cover these.
Yeah, let's rattle these off.
Fundamentally, I would not pick any of these in a tournament setting given the choice, because they're an F tier for a reason. I know you have a couple of them that I know you want to talk about, but yeah, so they fit into a few categories. Either small amounts of stats that don't do very much. So this is like Krampus, this is Fates, this is Galahad. Just not enough stats at relevant points of the game. Jack's Giant. Or they're late game heroes that don't really function that well. I mean, Mordred is in this category. I guess none of these others are late game heroes. Midas, who's just kind of bad, I expect is actually better in a tournament environment, but his baseline is so trash that that's nothing. Yeah, fundamentally, a lot of these are early game heroes. They just don't have enough of an impact that I'm happy to pick them, fundamentally. Jack's Giant in particular sounds like it would be a really good tournament hero. Yeah, you'll win all your fights on 2.0. No, you won't. Were you here when I talked about the good heroes? There's so many more stats than your 8 total stats you get on Jack's Giant. But you have a couple you want to talk about.
So this is where I disagree most strongly, I think. Because I think I'm quite happy to take Pup the Magic Dragon, Jack's Giant, Krampus, and Ivella from your F tier in a tournament setting.
Jack's Giant, wow.
Certainly over, like, Skip or Muerte. Like, one thing that's clear from this exercise, we have sent a lot more units down than we have moved them up.
That's true.
Like, the tier of units we don't want to take in this tournament is way larger than the tier of units we don't want to take on ladder. Like, are you going to pick Apocalypse over Jack's Giant?
No, that's fair.
Definitely not the heroes we're looking for. Definitely not those S and A tiers, except for Pup, which I'll get to. But part of the problem is everyone has those early game stats. Like, this is part of the problem that I have with, which one was it? Sadrak, or with Trophy Hunter, is you say, oh, you've got some extras, or even Pied Piper. You say, oh, you've got some extra stats on 2.1, on 2.2. You are a little bit stronger. Stronger than who? Nobody is going into the game without a hero power.
But yeah.
Everyone has something, and in a tournament setting, one of the things everyone has is stats in the early game. And therefore, you really can't afford not to. And Jack's Giant, it's not the stats I'm looking for, it's not where I want to be, but if I have faith in my ability to play the game, then the decisions I make during gameplay are going to be more important than the decisions I make up top. I need to not lose. 8 health will help.
Sure. I can believe that. I certainly think Pup is enough. The issue with Pup is that he really falls off a cliff. Like, his hero power not only becomes kind of small and kind of irrelevant, but also supports very quickly get pretty awkward. You both need to find them, and replacing supports can be awkward. Like, certainly almost no late game comps involve supports, generally speaking. The tier 6 supports kind of suck. But we don't care about
But
tier
once
6.
you're tier 6, you're
Yeah, yeah.
fine.
Agreed.
Like, also, I think supports fall off less of a cliff than they used to. Sporko is the best tier 4 unit.
That's a statement I don't agree with, but okay.
Tier 4 units are so weird. A lot of people have Sporko as the best tier 4 unit, and Sporko is one of the best generic tier 4 units. There's things that are better in specific comps or what have you. It's also worth noting that Fallen Angel Echo Wood is one of the most powerful things to do in lobbies at the moment. And Pup gets there quite well because you can use a support to whichever one you're lacking. At the moment, if you've been going in on a tree, you might have low power. So you just buy a Siren, put it in front of a Sporko, and now your Fallen Angel is big enough to tussle.
Sure.
I think the idea of Pup falling off on tier 4 is a historic idea. I don't think that's borne out by how games actually play at the moment.
I can believe that. Like, it definitely used to be the case that Lady of the Lake was like one of the worst tier 4 units, and therefore that was a part of the problem with Pup is you'd have to buy Lady of the Lakes. But I don't mind buying Lady of the Lakes these days.
Could you quickly daydream for me about being Pup and putting a Tweedledee in front of a Lady of the Lake?
It does sound really good. Maybe I haven't been giving Pup the attention he deserves. I still don't think he's a great ladder hero. I still think his late game doesn't exist, and for the most part, I don't want to be playing heroes who can't. If you're an early game hero, you need to give me some way that I can reliably rocket ahead in XP. Like, if I'm an early game hero, I need to be able to find a very, very powerful way of getting ahead in XP. So, for example, Wonder Waddle is a good early game hero, but also has triple polywoggles for the late game, extra econ from chickens and stuff, and better access to treasures to find Hat Ball or something for a late game. Pup doesn't offer me, like, I still have to buy tier 4 units during tier 4 to stay strong, and I might be strong enough to buy Wish Upon a Star or whatever, but good units aren't what women games good treasures are, and we're no better at finding treasures, and I think in general, Pup isn't going to get you first on ladder that often. I think you might definitely be right about Pup on in a tournament setting there.
Yeah, so for background, I have, because I've now played every hero 5 times, I have for the first time constructed my own tier list for the game, which you can find in the show notes. And the two major outliers on there compared to Syth's list are I have Pup up in A tier and Ivella in B tier. I'm aware last week we trash talked Ivella a fair bit, and I still believe that what Ivella's offering on paper doesn't look good enough. I think as a way of evaluating heroes, that holds up. I think the key thing we missed is that Ivella's not an evils hero, she's an animals hero. And the other animals heroes are really strong. Waddle and Piper are some of the best heroes in the game. And part of the reason for that is that the animals, especially early game animals on tier 3, your stags, your pigs, are really strong. Those are strong units that you want to pick up from the shop. Ivella gives those units upside. Stag saying when it dies, my evils get +1 attack is upside.
I don't agree that it gives pig upside, realistically. Unless you're doing some very questionable positioning. And again, my issue with Ivella is not really that she can't provide stats, is that the stats that those units go on are mostly bad. Like, you're specifically looking for ranged evil backline, right? Because giving like Minotaurs and stuff extra power is nothing. And so you're specifically looking for like Spellweaver and Shadow Assassin, which are not very good at scaling otherwise. So they can get stats during the fight, but they'll never be that big. I agree that she used to be a mid-game powerhouse, right? When she gave +1/+1.
And when evils was a playable comp.
Yeah. I think fundamentally that it's a combination of there aren't that many evil animals that are any good. Like, Kitty Cutpurse is an evil animal, but I hate buying it. So you're basically just looking for black cats or billy gruffs, I guess.
You don't care what the type of the animals is. Put a baby bear in front of your Sporko. Like, the baby bear's gonna die 3 times. My backline's gonna have +3 power. Like,
by tier 5, that sounds not exciting.
It's not exciting, but it is good enough.
Okay.
The other evil unit that giving power to is really good is Siren. Like,
Sure.
The other evil unit that giving power to is Mummy, right? Like,
what, a backline mummy? How are you making this mummy happen?
put a Mummy in slot 5.
Okay.
Fine, it'll kill their pig.
I think part of the issue I have is definitely fundamentally I only have 3 slots for my evil units. Like, if they're not evil animals, like I can't run Spellweaver slot 1 with Avella. That doesn't work. Like,
No.
I want Spellweaver as a unit that can gain a ton of power, but I can't put it. My positioning becomes really awkward. And often, something like a Peep, a way of getting a ton of animals, sometimes I want Peep in slot 5 so she can actually summon. Definitely can't do that. My back row is super busy. And then, like, summons can have diminishing returns with each other. Like, Black Cat plus Peep becomes awkward because you won't have space for the Peep if the Black Cat's dying. I find it really awkward. I find that there isn't enough. The positional problems are significant on Avella.
You say you find it really awkward. Go to your stats page right now. How many times have you played Avella on this patch?
It is 0.
I agree it sounds awkward. Here's another thing. Giving Mim power is not nothing in the early game.
No.
An O3 is not attacking. If you get a Black Cat in front of a Mim, I'm aware that's a really good start as anyone. Having that Mim tussle at the end of the brawl can change a tie with a baby root into a win.
Yeah, for sure. Like it is not nothing, but it's a combination of needing specific units, and then the payoff I don't believe is significant. I think the payoff is medium, and specific units for medium payoff is not enough for me.
A medium payoff on a turn that you're able to capitalize on it is everything. A medium payoff on a random turn, which is some of what Loki gives, right? Avella's very similar on my tier list to Loki. A medium payoff on a random turn, like Loki's randomly wished upon a star for me, or given me this gingerbread house, or this lightning bolt at random. Like, I can't capitalize on that in any way unless I have a pick. Sure. Because Avella gives you this payoff on turns that really matter, those early turns in the game, those 3.01 and 2, where we're able to buy Wishes Upon a Star and spinning golds and keep pigs alive.
I want to talk about. I think Avella pigs are a really big problem with the hero because like what I'm saying is your back row is so valuable. Where the hell am I putting a pig? If I have a pig, where are my evil units going?
Put a mummy in slot 4. Like if it dies first, it was still a mummy. It's okay.
I don't know. It sounds like the combination of needing very specific of that doesn't sound good to me still. Like I agree that yes, you are able to probably buy XP during 3.0 or 3. The tier 3 in general. I'm not convinced that the amount of stats you are offered is enough. Like you just need so many pieces to come together. I'm not convinced.
Fights at that stage in the game turn on very small amounts.
That's true.
Often as well. It can be the difference of 1 power. It can be the difference of 1 2-for-1, 1 extra attack with a ranged unit. It can be, and this comes up as Avella, the difference between your opponent's donkey summoning and your opponent's donkey not summoning.
It's true.
Yeah, so I think, yes, the stats rebound on paper. So we'll put Avella on the one to watch list. Do you have anything else to say prepared to call that show?
No, I think so. I think that was a fairly good... We have done a few episodes recently about tournament coverage and how tournaments are different to ladder and stuff. Mostly because there've been some back-to-back tournaments. Let us know if more tournament-based content is what you're looking for rather than ladder-based content. We're happy to adjust either way. But we are aware that we've done a bunch of tournament stuff relatively quickly.
Yeah, but by all means, do get in touch with the show and let us know if you like a show, if there's a point that you think we missed. We're always happy to hear from our listeners. And do tune in to the coverage and attend the tournament this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely.
It will be great to see you in the lobby. That's our show. Thank you so much for listening. You can find us on the Discord. I'm Jethro. He's Synthesis. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at 7th Tier Podcast. The number 7, the word podcast. We'll be back next week with the same content, but we'll be saying different words. Until then, don't forget, if I hit tier 6, I'm happy. Have a great week.